How's it going, everyone? This is the George here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Oppenheimer. This is the next film in Christopher Nolan's filmography. Uh, as I said, directed by Christopher Nolan and stars Cillian Murphy this time around, as well as a huge cast that includes Robert Downey Jr., Matt Damon, Florence Pugh, and Emily Blunt, and other familiar faces if you've seen multiple television shows and movies throughout the years. There's too many of them to list because this is the biggest cast that Christopher Nolan has ever had. This is probably the biggest cast for a movie that's not a franchise movie. But this is about J. Robert Oppenheimer, played by Cillian Murphy, and explores the creation of the atom bomb, the aftermath of it, his connections to the Communist Party, how that caused a lot of controversy before he got recruited to the Manhattan Project, and pretty much in the similar veins of Dunkirk and completely different from the Dark Knight trilogy, Inception, Interstellar, and Tenet. This is a movie based off true events. This is based off a book that Christopher Nolan read. But unlike Dunkirk, this isn't a action packed movie or a movie that's heavily action. It's more based on court hearings, on historical events that happened, exposition scenes, and a lot of dialogue. So if you're someone that's expecting Christopher Nolan action, like many of Christopher Nolan's previous movies, we just a heads up, it's not really that. Although you do see the bomb go off at a certain point in the film. But when it comes to Christopher Nolan, this is one of my favorite directors. The first film of his that I watched was Batman Begins, and I watched The Dark Knight. Then I watched The Prestige in one of my classes in eighth grade, and I loved that movie, even though most of my classmates were bored of that movie. Then I saw Inception. I fell in love with that movie. It's one of my top 20 favorite movies of all time. And I discovered Christopher Nolan's previous movies, including Following, Insomnia, and Memento. And I've gone on to watch all of Christopher Nolan's other movies. Tenet was actually the first movie that I saw once the theaters reopened. And there's never been a Christopher Nolan movie that I disliked. There are some Christopher Nolan movies that I love a lot. Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, Inception, and Memento are some of my all-time favorite movies. There are some movies of his that I just like, but I don't love. Tenet's one of them. I like Tenet, but it's not one of my favorite movies. My least favorite movie of Nolan's is probably his first movie that he made, Following, which is a short movie shot in black and white. But even that's a movie that I can rewatch at any time, and I'm like, this is a good movie. It's not the best movie ever, but it's pretty good. And Oppenheimer definitely continues that strong strand of Christopher Nolan movies. In fact, I'll be honest, this is probably one of my top five favorite Christopher Nolan movies ever. This is probably his best movie since Inception, and I've loved all of his movies that have come out after Inception. I'm one of the few people that love Dark Knight Rises. I love Interstellar. I love Dunkirk. But Oppenheimer's one of those movies that the more I'm thinking about it, I'm going to be thinking about this movie for a long time because so much happens and there's so much to think because this is based off a true person. Oppenheimer was a real person. He created the atom bomb, and the after effect of that from nearly 80 years ago, we're still dealing with today because things have changed a lot since then. If you recall, like this is the bomb that they dropped on Japan. We've had a Cold War after World War II that went on for many years, and there are other countries that now have these weapons. So, like this is something that has changed history at a cost because this helped us win World War II, but at a cost. But let's get into the movie. Cillian Murphy, who has been in a lot of Christopher Nolan movies, but mostly as a supporting actor. He was Scarecrow in the Dark Knight trilogy. He played a supporting role in Inception and Dunkirk. He's the main lead for once, and Cillian Murphy kills it in this role. He was phenomenal. This is definitely his best performance in any product, in my opinion, of his, and he's a great actor in general. But like his facial expressions, like his eyes, he captures it so well. He looks like Oppenheimer, and this is a very complex character because at first when we were first introduced to him, he's just like he, well, when we first see like him in like the late 1920s we see him as a college student, he's like very anxious, like he misses home. But then we see like what this character goes through from like becoming like going to all these places to becoming a professor to getting recruited to making this bomb. Um, we see like his connections to the Communist Party, even though he was never a member of the Communist Party, but his connections to certain people from that party, including his own brother. Um, how he feels after the bomb, because at a certain point in the film, spoiler alert, I feel like I might have to address some spoiler stuff, but I'm not going to go deep into that. In the film, we don't see the bomb get dropped in Hiroshima, but we see it get announced. And everyone's cheering for it, everyone's happy about it, but Oppenheimer's processing it. And when he's talking to this crowd at a certain point in the film, it's really dawning upon him that, yeah, they may have won the war, but now what's going to happen afterwards? But Cillian Murphy nailed this role. He like his body language, like his facial expressions as well. He nailed it. He definitely deserves to get nominated for Best Actor this year. Robert Downey Jr. as well. He's more so heavily in the second half of the film, particularly that last hour. I mean, he's in many parts throughout the film. Like they cut to things with Oppenheimer, then they'll cut briefly to stuff with Robert Downey Jr. and his character and his connection to Oppenheimer. And then like they go more into detail about it as the film progresses. But Robert Downey Jr., first of all, the costume and makeup team did an incredible job with not just Robert Downey Jr., but with all the cast in this film. But we know Robert Downey Jr., he's played Iron Man in the MCU, but this is definitely his best performance in a while. We almost forget because Robert Downey Jr., he had a couple of movies after his struggles, his personal struggles with drugs and all that. There were only a couple of movies that we saw him in before he dedicated 11 years to being Iron Man and using a couple of those years to be Sherlock Holmes. But if you recall, Robert Downey Jr. was always a great actor in any role, and we were reminded of that with this movie. And it also makes us forget that he was in that awful Doolittle movie from 2020. But Robert Downey Jr. also nailed it. I think he deserves to get nominated for Best Supporting Actor. I will say this is a 3-hour movie, but there's certain characters or actors that feel limited with their screen time. For example, Florence Pugh, she plays this character Jean, who was a real life member of the Communist Party who had a relationship with Oppenheimer. She's only in a few scenes, but in those few scenes, she gives it her 100% and nails her playing her character. Emily Blunt as Oppenheimer's wife. For half her scene, she's in the background watching Oppenheimer get questioned or seeing what Oppenheimer's doing at times. But like when it's her moment, like when the spotlight's on her, she's phenomenal. She gives it her 100%. Matt Damon's also great as well. I'm not gonna list all the performances because there's so many actors. I mean, Josh Peck from Drake and Josh is in this film. Devin Bostick, sorry if I mispronounced that last name, who played Roderick in Diary of a Wimpy Kid, is in this movie. Gary Oldman plays Truman in this film. Rami Malek's in this film. There's so many actors and actresses, and like there were some faces that I saw. I was like, oh, this person's in the movie that I either missed hearing was going to be in the movie, or because there were so many other people I didn't really notice their name be brought up when they said, "Oh, this person's going to be in Oppenheimer." But no, there's not one bad performance in this movie. Ludwig Göransson's score, sorry if I mispronounced that name as well, is incredible in this movie. This is the second time he's doing a score for Nolan. The first time was Tenet, but he does an incredible job with the score. The sounding. So, like, the problem with Christopher Nolan movies, especially some of the more recent ones, is the sound editing, because there's times where the music is so loud you can barely hear the dialogue. For the most part, it felt like this movie fixed that. There are a couple of times when the music does feel louder, or like the sound, the background sounds are louder than the dialogue. But most of the time when that happens, it's done intentionally, because we're also seeing what Oppenheimer is thinking. or what Oppenheimer is seeing with his own eyes, or hearing, or what he thinks he hears. So it was done intentionally. For example, if Oppenheimer's talking or he's hearing a scut or someone's talking in front of Oppenheimer, he'll hear noise, and that's basically what he's feeling or what he thinks he's hearing. So like it was done intentionally. When it's done intentionally, it works out very well. The practical effects, there's a lot of practical effects in this film, and things that you would think were done with CGI was actually not done with CGI. That was actually done practically. The explosions when they're testing these bombs were real explosions. There are some scenes where you see it looks like atoms like going together. They actually found ways to do that practically. And that's phenomenal at a time when CGI is done so heavily, especially in a post-pandemic world. Like they pulled it off with this film. The way they captured the time periods in this film, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, it's done very well. There's some scenes where it's done in black and white, and it reminded me of Nolan's second film, Memento, where there were specific scenes that were done in black and white in that movie. It's the same thing here. When certain things are happening, for example, when Robert Downey Jr. is on screen, that's when we get black and white. But when we get to Cillian Murphy and most of his scenes, unless he's with Robert Downey Jr. on screen, his scenes will be in color. There'll be a couple times where they have Cillian Murphy feet in black and white, but that's going to be when he's with Robert Downey Jr. And there's a lot of exposition in this film, but it's interesting, great exposition. And I'm someone who loves history, and I still enjoyed it. And right when you think the film's going to probably end, it keeps going because you're also dealing with the aftermath of it. You're Oppenheimer's being questioned, and again, those ties that he had to the Communist Party, some of his political beliefs come back to later bite him when he's being questioned later on in the film, and it explains why at the beginning of the film he's being questioned, and we learn more about it. So this isn't just about the making of the bomb. This is about Oppenheimer before he got recruited to making this bomb, and the aftermath and how they deal with it. And when you see it, like when you see the bomb, the big explosion, it's like one of those things where you feel like they accomplished it, but it's going to come at a cost because we know what's going to happen. So overall, with Oppenheimer, I love this movie. The sound editing was a lot better this time around. The performances were excellent. Cillian Murphy and Robert Downey Jr. should get nominated for Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor. The makeup and costumes were phenomenal. The soundtrack was incredible. The practical effects work was incredible. And I feel like if there's ever going to be a Christopher Nolan movie that deserves to get nominated for Best Movie and possibly win it, because I don't know what other movies are going to come out that can get nominated, this is probably the movie that does it. And the thing is, Christopher Nolan, I don't think he's trying to get that best like film nomination. I mean, he probably is, but he's not like making it like an Oscar bait movie. Because he wanted to make this movie after reading a book about Oppenheimer. But yeah, this is the film that deserves it. If any Christopher Nolan movie deserves to get nominated. Overall, I'm going to give Oppenheimer an A+. This is definitely one of the best movies of 2023. This is probably one of my top 5 favorite Christopher Nolan movies. I'm not going to go in order. I'm just going to go based off the year they came out. Memento, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, Inception, and now Oppenheimer. Christopher Nolan, this is one of the best directors, one of my favorite directors of our time. And I would like to see him do more historical movies similar to this, because this movie also reminded me of those historical movies that were coming out in like the 2000s, the 90s, that felt like blockbuster movies that are based off of historical events, but it's like done in a Christopher Nolan kind of way. I want to get back to that kind of movie making, because at a time when there's so many blockbuster movies, blockbuster franchise movies coming out, we forget that we can get some phenomenal movies that are based off historical events that have blockbuster stakes. So this is what this movie reminded me of. But what are your thoughts on Oppenheimer? Did you love it? Did you hate it? And what's your favorite Christopher Nolan movie that's not a Dark Knight trilogy movie? I'll say that. My favorite is probably Inception. Let me know in the comments down below. And I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe already if you haven't. Please share this with someone that loves Christopher Nolan, that loves historical movies. And I hope to see you guys real soon. Take care, everyone.